Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. We're just going to hold on a minute here while our platform's letting everyone in, but thank you so much for joining. As you're joining, you'll notice that your camera is automatically off, your mics are automatically muted, which is how our participants will stay today. But feel free to use the chat throughout our session. So please go ahead and head to the chat, give us a greeting, let us know where you're tuning in from today. We would love to hear from you, and we'll be started here shortly. Hello, hello. Thanks for joining, everyone. I see our numbers growing. Oh, and those greetings coming in. Hi, it looks like we have people joining from all over the country today, which is so great. Thank you so much for joining. We're excited to have our last discussion of Mental Health Month today. So I see our numbers slowing down a little bit. We'll go ahead and get started. Thank you so much for joining us, and welcome to today's webinar, Connecting Your Mind, Body, and Surrounding Nature as a Form of Healing. My name's Jackie Zimmerman. I'm the Public Education Associate at Mental Health America's National Office, and I'll be moderating today's webinar. I have just a few notes for you before I introduce our speakers. This webinar is being recorded and will be emailed out to all registrants within 1 week. We currently do not offer CEUs, but if you would like to request a certificate of attendance, I'll post the link to the form where you can request one of those in the chat here shortly, and that will also be included in your follow-up email. Like I said, your cameras are off and your mics are muted, but we encourage you to use the chat throughout today to make comments, ask questions, share knowledge, experiences, and resources. We always encourage that. And if we do have a little time at the end, we'll take some questions from the audience. As I mentioned, and as many of you know, May is Mental Health Awareness Month. We thank you for joining us this month. At MHA, all month we've been talking about how our environment, our surroundings impact our mental health and in what different ways. And each week we've kind of explored what that looks like in different ways, from housing to community. And this week we are focusing on the outdoors and nature and how being outside can impact our mental and physical health. So that is what we're here to chat about today. And with me, I have some wonderful panelists that I'd love to introduce before we jump into discussion. First, with us today, we have Vanessa Villanova, a recent graduate from the University of Hawaii at Manoa, having earned a bachelor's in natural resource and environmental management with a specialization in community and cultural resource management. As the daughter of Mexican immigrants and having grown up in the Inland Empire of Southern California, community resilience is the focal point in every project Vanessa takes on. Welcome, Vanessa. We are so glad to have you here with us today. We also have with us Alma McCormick, who's a member of the Crow Indian Nation and the Executive Director of Messengers for Health, a Crow Indian nonprofit organization located on the Crow Indian Reservation in Montana. She's a passionate community leader and activist working to improve the health and well-being of her people. Alma has many years of successful experience in community-based participatory health research to address health disparities faced by the Crow people. Welcome, Alma. We also have today with us Juan Martinez Pineda, the Senior Management at the Aspen Institute for Community Solutions. He's the founder of Fresh Tracks, a community-led cross-cultural revolution rooted in the healing power of the outdoors. His work has helped to grow the silo-breaking strategy for systems change and youth power building, while also lifting up successful stories of civic engagement and community organizing. Juan was named the National Geographic Explorer in 2011 and a member of the inaugural class of the Explorers Club 50 in 2021 for his work to engage the rising generation of youth to the healing power of the outdoors and culture. He's a TED speaker, community organizer, author, and is dedicated to bringing the power of equity and justice to life through youth and community-driven solutions. Welcome, Juan. And last but not least, in the slightest, we have Kay Rodriguez, who is the founder of Outerly, a community platform connecting city dwellers to local green spaces and to each other. Her mission is to increase knowledge and access to urban outdoor activities to improve collective mental, physical, and social health. Previously, Kay worked in corporate strategy at Bain & Company, National Geographic, and Explorer. Welcome, Kay. And welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. We have such a great group for this discussion. And so we'll jump right into it. Like I had said, for everyone watching, feel free to ask questions in the chat, and we might have some time to get to those. But we're just going to dive right in. So it's clear from all of those bios that we went through and your experiences that each of you have a passion for this topic, nature and outdoors, and the connection to improving people's health, mental and physical. And so I would just love to hear a little bit more from each of you about your personal connection to nature and what's played a role in developing that connection over time. And anyone feel free to start us off. Go ahead, Alma.
This is Alma. I can go ahead and share a little bit. As was mentioned in my bio, I'm a member of the Crow Indian Nation, the Apsáalooke, which means the children of the large-beaked bird. And in our culture, spirituality is the core and the foundation, and it's incorporated into every way of our lives. And so the relationship that we have with Akbaratia, the creator of everything, we have a personal relationship with him. And so with that reverence and honor and respect that we have for the creator of everything, God, all that he has created, our people, our ancestors, that we have a very strong connection and respect to our land, to our environment, because everything was created for our own survival, for our own health. The deer, the elk, and the buffalo that our ancestors ate and we still eat today. The natural herbs for healing, like the yarrow, the bitterroot, that we still utilize today. The berries. And so for me, there's a very strong connection to the land and respect. And we appreciate it because it's our survival. And to tell you the truth, today, our people have been afflicted by poor health, and we can go into many details of what happened to our indigenous people through historical trauma, but we still have an abundance of the wild game, and we still live in an area where the mountains are. And for me, that connection is, I'll just share just a brief experience. When I'm feeling a little bit overwhelmed and maybe, stress of, work and things, I don't have to drive very far to get a closer view of the mountains. And it's just like, it calms me. It's just like therapy. And our ancestors, and even today, people still go to the mountains to fast and pray. Prayer is it's our way of life. Prayer is incorporated in all that we do. And they go and they used to fast for several days. They go without water and food. And they would go, and that's when they had their intimate encounters with the Creator, with God, and even received songs that today we call them Crow gospel hymns. They're all in the Crow language. I speak my Crow language. It was my first language, and many of our people, we are still maintaining our language, and our language is our culture. And so that's just a little bit of my background. Thank you.
I can go next. Like Jackie said, my name is Kay Rodriguez, and maybe unlike a lot of you, I did not grow up doing a lot of outdoor activities. I lived in the foothills of the Blue Ridge Mountains in Lynchburg, Virginia. That's where I grew up. And while I did go to parks and do sports and go on the occasional hike, I did not ever consider myself an outdoorsy person until I had graduated college. I was out in the world working in a corporate job, and I was sent to Calgary, Canada as for a client engagement. And on the weekends, I could drive 1 hour and be in the beautiful Canadian Rockies. And so I decided I was going to, at that point, learn how to camp, learn how to hike, learn how to paddle, do all of the things so that I could really enjoy my experience. And the benefits that I found in working a very stressful, high energy corporate job, the benefits that I felt from being in nature were just unparalleled. I felt so much more alive. I felt so much more refreshed. I felt like I could do my job better, even though I was working sometimes 70, 80 hours a week. And so I just got hooked. And when I moved a couple of years ago to Chicago, Illinois, for another job that I took, I realized that there weren't a lot of resources or places to go to find information on where to go outside in cities. So Alma, when she was saying I can just drive a little bit and see the mountains, that is such an immense privilege. And I am so jealous. But a lot of people like me live in cities where we look out our window and see concrete. And so I said, you know what, this is not okay. There needs to be some sort of resource for the 83% of Americans who live in urban environments to experience the beautiful benefits of nature that I got to experience when I was in Canada. And so I started what is now Outerly. Outerly is a community platform. It's an app that helps people who live in cities find places to go in their city within drive distance or public transportation even, and then connect with other people who live in their city who also want to try those activities. And so the whole purpose of that is not just to connect people, to create community, to bring people outside, but also to improve collective mental health within urban environments by giving people more knowledge and access and resources to these outdoor nature green spaces. I'm so excited to be here today. I am thoroughly impressed with all of the other panelists who are here with me, and I'm excited to chat about nature and mental health.
Yeah, so I think y'all have kind of touched on it already, but I think like the self-care aspect really comes in because we, as humans, as animals that we are to this earth, need nature. And we're so accustomed to nature that we haven't realized how disconnected we have been these past or within our lifetime. But genetically, right, like there are so many relationships that we're missing out on. And so when we go into nature, when we even start gardening in our backyard, we start feeling a connection, right? And the healing comes from not only reconnecting in that way, but also from divesting and like taking time away from oppressive systems. Like I know, Kay, you were touching on how draining these jobs can really be and how isolating they can be. And when you go back into nature and you go into these green spaces when they're accessible, which is frustrating that a lot of us don't have it at our access, but when you go back, you realize how much you're missing out on and the reconnection with what the world really is about, you know? And so I think that's where I've learned like that's the healing aspect, right? Like mending that relationship and really creating new ones as well. Because as I said, like my parents are from Mexico. So like the plants around here, because I'm in California, aren't plants that they grew up around, right? So I'm reacquainting myself not only with nature as a whole, but also with new plant relatives and new insect relatives, all kinds of relatives, right? So yeah, that's how I see the self-care aspect and the healing aspect.
Oh, so much good good medicine. Thank y'all. Skarupe Yadatu Nalaya Juan Chinje Alicia Chinje Isabel. Greetings, relatives. My name is Juan, child of Alicia, child of Isabel. My people hail from Istmos de Tehuantepec, Oaxaca, the Beneditza, the Zapotec people, the people of the cloud. And I am today in the land of the crudo, the come crudo, the Toncoa, the Cahualtecan, also known as Austin, Texas. And so I also invoke all of you to recognize that there, wherever you stand on today, there was original stewards of that land and that people, and they are still here today. We are still here as Indigenous peoples. And to connect to your own Indigenous roots as well too, but in the land where you stand today, to encourage all of us to learn in that journey. As a displaced Indigenous person myself, I am constantly looking for that invitation from the people in the land. And sometimes I am an uninvited guest, and sometimes I am an invited guest. And we are all either one or the other. And so encourage all of us to lean into that truth. For me, nature in the outdoors has always been a part of my life. I grew up in South Central LA, and there was a moment when I thought that maybe it wasn't, that I was surrounded by concrete, that I was surrounded by violence. But what, in retrospect today, what I didn't realize that my parents with them brought their seeds from our communities. And they literally broke through concrete to be able to plant those seeds and set roots in South Central LA. And we were growing our food. And for us, it wasn't urban gardening. It was survival. It was where we fought, where we found our medicine, where we found our food, where we made salsa from, where we made these traditional foods from. Tacos are one of my favorite things in the world. And taco, a taco is a representation of land and people and culture. The word itself is tradition. It is Indigenous food, and just like, it's one of the best ways to bring people together. And so for me, the outdoors was always a part of, but there was a moment in my life when I thought it wasn't, and that was a very Eurocentric mindset that was set upon me to think about that way of, like, I was disconnected from the world of nature. And so I think a lot of Indigenous knowledge really sets us up for success in thinking, like, we have never been separate than nature. And the reason why we are now have a gap between healing and ourselves is because we've been disconnected from nature, and sometimes very purposefully, sometimes very intentionally, and sometimes by mistake and unknowingly. Like, the people who have set these norms and policies in place may not ever have thought that they were displacing generations, but the pain and the impact is there. And so for me, nature and a connection to nature is healing. And for me, it is medicine. For me, it is family. For me, it is the moment that my dad took us to a park in South Central LA, Elysian Park, which sits in the shadow of Dodger Stadium, which also has a whole other history. I'm a Dodger fan, but it's hard to be sometimes a Dodger fan with all the history and recent history there as well too, and reckoning that's happening currently with the LGBTQ relatives that are there. So just want to honor them as well too and say that they are present. But in that park, my dad took us and he showed us to this park. We had absolutely no connection to it, and he said, "This is your park." And I think sometimes that's the moment that we all need, is to say that you are welcome, you are here. Part of ceremony is to say, hey, I see you, this is us, this is our space. And the more of that we can do with each other, for each other, and together, I think the closer we will be to healing each other through the power of the outdoors.
I love that. Thank you all. I heard so many powerful things. You touched on healing and self-care and those practices that are tied back to mental health. And part of Mental Health Month and what we're trying to do is to get people to expand their thoughts of how to take care of their mental health and what that looks like. And really, nature, and just listening to all of you, can be such an important piece to having that good mental health, supporting your mental health, finding ways to improve it and nurture it. And so I'd love just to dig a little deeper into that. If anyone has additional comments on, how they personally or with people that you've worked with in your organization, how have you seen kind of this healing power of nature impact lives and mental health? And again, it can be you personally, it can be someone in your life that you've seen that impact.
I can go. I actually have a very concrete example of this personally from just last weekend. I have lived experience with mental health. I have struggled pretty much my entire life with anxiety and more recently diagnosed depression. And I go through cycles of burnout and of depressive episodes that are really, really debilitating, to the point where I, as an entrepreneur, can't even focus on my own work because I can't see out of the tunnel. And last weekend, I decided to take my beat up camper van out to the coast for the weekend after several weeks of feeling very, frankly, suffocated by my depression and my mental state. And I drove out to the coast, got there at 10 p.m., walked straight out to the water, dipped my toes in the water, closed my eyes, listened to the wind howling around me and the waves crashing on the shore, and just felt what it was like to be there in that moment with my toes in the sand and the cold air around me and the waves in front of me. And I will tell you that, I've been doing therapy for several years. I have used antidepressants. I have all kinds of coping mechanisms that I've learned through that therapy. One of the most grounding things for me is just being outside, putting my feet on the ground, closing my eyes, and just feeling what nature feels like. It is thrilling. It is mind-opening. It is everything. And that is one personal example of how I use nature as self-care, even if it's just walking out the front door, putting my feet in the grass, closing my eyes and listening to cars go by. It's still being outside and feeling the space around you in a way that being indoors, being on social media, tunnel visioned, locked onto a screen cannot deliver.
And this is Elma. I can go next. And so, again, for me personally, I think the most devastating experience that I went through and endured was losing my little twin daughter to cancer many years ago. But yet it was something that could have really taken me, down. But it goes back to what I shared at the beginning, that relationship. It caused me to just reach out and develop a stronger relationship with God, the Creator, Akbaratia, as we call him in the Crow language, as Crow people, the Creator of everything. And with that establishment, with that aligned, I made it through, and it filled my heart with passion. There's a phrase that came to me recently. It's how you cope that matters. And right now I'm speaking very passionately because our nonprofit, we are taking some steps now to help our people to improve mental and emotional wellness. As rich as our culture is, and as the respect that we have for the land and our environment, nature, the animals that sustained us, that gave us the food, the plants that gave us healing to our bodies, there has been a disconnect because of how we've been coping with substance abuse, the prevalence of it in this little community. There's about 14,000 enrolled Crow members, about 8,000 live on the Crow Indian Reservation. I was born and raised here. I've been living here all my life. I've seen the changes. So we talk about the environment, the way it looked, even the environment has changed. When we aligned ourselves with the Creator who created this beautiful environment and everything within it to keep us healthy and well, and that we can have literally kind of have a relationship, it's been disrupted. And so we need to realign. And I believe it's that realignment. For me, I aligned myself, and divinely, He's taken me on a path to help my people. Passion in my heart to help other people that are dealing with cancer. Now I'm running this nonprofit, Messengers for Health. It's been around for 22 years in the Crow Indian community. As I've grown, as I've experienced, and as I've understood, even with spiritual eyes of understanding, my people are oppressed spiritually, and there's a lot of chronic health issues due to it. It's time for my people to heal. And if there's me and a few others, that's all it takes. Because of our spirituality, because of my prayer, because of how I am healthy and well today, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, even though I'm in the midst of chaos, you might say, that speaks a lot. I say one thing, for me to be sober from alcohol or drugs is phenomenal. It's prevalent here. And so now we're taking steps to help my people. Our people need to reconnect, first of all, with God, Aparatya, the creator of everything. And when we align ourselves, we are going to see a transformation in our land. We are not taking care of our land like the way we should be. It's like disrespect. This is beautiful here. In fact, this morning, it's like when you're in alignment, you will begin to just notice the beauty around you. But when we are not in alignment, we're not noticing it. We're just looking at the negative circumstances, and we are not broadening our vision. And I see a vision spiritually by faith for improvement for my people. And that's what I'd like to share. Thank you.
I think for me, one of the ways that I've seen nature play a connection with mental health is at a systems level, right? The U.S. Surgeon General just announced a teen mental health and teen and young adult mental health crisis in this country, and in that same vein, you can almost make a direct correlation to the amount of time that young people are spending connected indoors, or the nearest, how many steps can they take to the nearest outlet, or how many steps are they away from their cell phone. I think that can be used as an indicator about where your well-being can be placed in those roles. And so there's connections to be made all around in terms of how we are talking about this. And I also think that there's we're sometimes placed in a very binary way of like thinking about the outdoors. You either are outdoors and doing these extravagant activities and hiking or climbing mountains or doing some extreme sport. Oftentimes it doesn't have to be that. It can be as simple as gardening. It can be as simple as like taking a walk down to the nearest around the block, taking in the air, taking in the trees, bird watching, so many ways of connecting with nature and the outdoors that I think sometimes are undermined and under misunderstood almost in a way that so many of the things that we're trying to aim for can't be done. We have young leaders and young therapists who are starting to take their clients on walks, on nature walks, instead of doing it in a closed room and four walls, which nothing against it, but like I think the opportunity to also like encourage conversations in the outdoors and create that space. One of the things that I always say is progress moves at the speed of trust. Progress moves at the speed of trust, and there's very few things that can accelerate trust, like time spent in the outdoors together. And for me, that's what I lean into the work that we do, and being able to bring together communities and thought leaders from different perspectives who may not have a connection but care about young people doing the good work, but can also find the healing and find the space to do and find the creation of trust in those connections, and do it with the outdoors as a platform for them to be able to do so. And so as we turn to heal our communities, I think the nature and the outdoors can play a critical role in helping us do that.
For me, I was diagnosed with major depressive disorder and an anxiety disorder at a young age, like 15. And that's around the time when I was also learning about social justice and realizing that in every social justice movement and every issue, an underlying topic or really the environment was there, you know, like when we experience racism, there's also environmental racism. When we try to access our parks, there's barriers due to classism and everything, right? So realizing that the environment was something that we needed to cultivate and share with people, I got more involved in creating an environmental club and kind of devoted my time to being outdoors, whether it was like through cleanups or just kind of, I ran cross country too. And so there's this idea, like, if you're stressed, and I don't know if it's like more of a like Latina thing, but telling your kids if you're stressed, just get busy, you know, like do something. And I feel like that's true to an extent, but it's also about intentionality. And so honestly, I think I'm so lucky to have gone down that path of like what I chose to do was involving the environment. Because if I would have just gotten a part-time job in that time, it would have taken me a different way, right? Like if I would have just studied harder, it wouldn't have impacted my mental health in such a positive effect as being in nature and really familiarizing myself with my community. Because on those runs, what else do you do? You're running for miles, you just observe and you see plants and you see the hills that we're running like up and down, like it's creating familiarity. And I think that kind of speaks to what Juan was saying about trust. Like the more you know a place, the more comfortable you feel in it. And there are barriers, right? Like oftentimes as women, especially as like young kids, you're told not to go anywhere alone. So you're already creating this distrust with the environment and those places that you call home, right? And so like building that and cultivating and experiencing it in different ways really pulled me out of that and has set me down a path of like restoration. And like that can be either with the ecosystems around me or really just relationships that I have personally to my community, to people around me, to the land around me. So it's just really valuable to be intentional in the way that you approach in the way that you approach the community and the environment around you.
I love that. Thank you, Vanessa. And thank you all for sharing and being so vulnerable and sharing your personal experiences. I know I've been keeping an eye on the chat, and a lot of people are relating to a lot of those experiences. And through mental health challenges, whether it's a mental health condition or it's, you know, a period of your time where you're just experiencing increased stress or pressure or anxiety, it's such a powerful tool to have. As I think Kay mentioned, you know, there's lots of things that we can do to care for our mental health, but having this as another tool, another option, another way to connect and find healing in ourselves is so important. And so thank you all for sharing your personal stories and journeys with finding those connections. I want to kind of talk a little bit about for people that might be struggling in finding those connections. If we have people listening or watching that have thought, you know, don't always get out in nature. I haven't felt that connection before. I haven't had these same experiences, but maybe I want to. And that lack of connection can happen for a variety of reasons. It might be that it's not a part of your culture or spirituality or tradition. You might be living in an urban area and not have as easy of access to green space or outdoors. But I'd love to just kind of hear your thoughts and suggestions on ways that people can start to explore finding a connection with nature or green space or being outside to really improve their mental health.
And this is Elma. I can go ahead and share. As I mentioned, we live in a very rich land. Even though the Crow land was much larger, like 35 million acres, and then once it was reduced down through the land treaties, it's 2.3 million acres, but it's still a very rich area. And I would encourage people, I mean, we have a lot of tourists that come, and a lot of them like to fish. If they like to fish, that's another thing that I grew up doing. I mean, just going to the foot of the mountains and fishing around, in one of the creeks. And but we do have an area where people like to go and fish and just enjoy the surrounding. I would encourage that to really. I think it's worth their while. I really feel that we take it for granted, us, that we live here. This is our land, and other people come and just are fascinated. And so we need to be appreciative. And then people come, they're tourists, they're visitors. We welcome them, and they come and they begin to just experience, in order to even learn more about the Crow Indian people, if they are interested in our culture. We invite them to come and just come to the land, experience, go fishing, and just drive around and go up to the mountain areas. And so I would really encourage that, because like I said, it just does something for you. I think it's just for every human being, not just, for me as a Crow Indian, just taking a closer view of the mountains, seeing some wildlife, seeing some deer, some buffalo, some moose. We always see that, and you will see that. And even just seeing those animals that are free to roam, that does something for us too. So I would encourage that, to just go and take that little vacation and connect to this land that belongs to all of us. It's every human being. The Creator created it for all of us to enjoy and to be blessed by it. Thank you.
Thank you, Alma. That's such a beautiful invitation, and I'll just keep adding to that invitation that yeah, land is sacred, and land is powerful. Like the what it can do, not just land but the elements, sea and water and everything around us. But at a very practical level, I would say there's a tremendous amount of tools out there. Kay, I think, is going to talk about one very specific tool. But there's so many clubs out there that I've seen, very close relationships. There's like Latino Outdoors, there's Outdoor Afro, organizations, affinity groups. If I've seen groups that are like Star Wars fans that are organizing hiking trips, right? So if there's something that you are interested in or can be a leverage point into connecting, there are many tools, and sometimes all it takes is a quick search. And if there isn't the tool, I would invite also that it doesn't need to be like this grand, like you joining the Sierra Club. Sometimes it can just be you walking down around the corner with a neighbor, with a friend, bringing someone bringing a child with you that your little cousin, your family members, whoever that may be. Sometimes it's the simple things that start to create a ripple effect that goes out into the world. And if it's not present for you right now, maybe you are the person that you've been waiting for. Maybe you are the person that it will start that space for others to find healing through nature because of the space that you've been able to create. And so I really want to encourage that space as well too. There's a tremendous amount of tools. I named a couple of them. HipCamp, Outerly, we'll talk about here as well too. Your local REI store, if you're near an REI store, has an abundance of tools that are very coordinated with this as well too. They're very aware of May is Mental Health Month, and so they want to help and amplify that and encourage people to get outdoors. So do that. And then I think the resources are always a question, right? Time is always limited. It is the most precious thing in our life. It is the one thing you can't buy, the one thing you can't get back. Show me where you spend your time, and I will know what love means to you. And as you're thinking about that definition of love, what does self-love mean to you? What does love show up? And if it means showing up for community, it means cooking a good meal for yourself. Like, what does self-love mean? And if in that equation you find that love is also finding space to heal in the outdoors, then make the time for that as well too, and find that time. And the other resources are money, right? There's always money that I hear as one of the barriers to getting outdoors, whether that's transportation and that's other things. And granted, we're all on a different privilege spectrum. We all have different access to privilege of those resources. But I would say that underestimating where someone is in that privilege of access to resources is always one of the things that counts out an entire swath of community or people. Just because someone lives in the inner city and it has no connection to the outdoors doesn't mean that they don't have the resources to do that. And so I would discount that as something that we lean into, because it matters where we invest our time. Ask any of my family members where we've spent our quinceañera and the amount of money that we spend on a quinceañera or a party for one of our loved ones. And it's a lot of money. It's a substantial amount of money. If we had those same connections, and many of us do and are privileged to, we can also allocate the resources to make that kind of investment in our self-care and self-love and find the healing spaces in nature as we need to.
I just want to piggyback off of what Juan was saying. First of all, I'd like to share a stat, because I know personally, having gotten into the outdoors as an adult primarily, it can feel really isolating when you're like, I want to learn how to hike and I don't know anybody who can teach me, and I don't know where to go to begin. Only 54% of Americans participate in an outdoor activity at least once per year. So if anyone listening to this does not feel like they are equipped to go outside and hasn't been able to do it, you are not alone. Almost half of the country is in the same or similar position to you. So with that said, I think what resonates with me in this question is two main areas. The first, to Juan's point, is not only just using the resources that are available, which there are plenty, but also redefining what outdoorsy means. If you go on any outdoor gear company website, you'll see people hiking mountains, climbing things, wearing helmets, crampons. It looks very intense, it looks very hardcore, and it looks, frankly, really daunting. And it's very easy to say to yourself, I don't belong in that. I can't do that. I don't know how to do that. I don't belong here. And what I'm trying to do, what our organization Outerly is trying to do, is really redefine what outdoorsy means. Yes, it can mean summiting a 14er in Colorado, wearing your crampons, your helmet, etc. But it can also mean walking down the corner of your house and stopping to look at a bird that looks really cool in the tree. And then going maybe on your phone or looking at a book and saying, what bird was that? the outdoors is simply being outside of your house. And whether that means walking down the concrete sidewalk in your neighborhood or summiting a mountain, that does not matter. And so if we can redefine what the first step of outdoorsy looks like, then we can welcome more people into this space. The second thing is, in our organization, in my work that I've done, I've talked to hundreds and hundreds of people about what the barriers are for them getting outdoors. And the number one barrier that we heard, almost 75% of people said that they would go outside more often if they could easily find somebody else to go with them. And so that is the entire impetus for Outerly and helping to connect people with each other. But it's also, I say this because it may not be forcing yourself to try and learn something or try and do something that feels very intimidating. It could be finding a connection with people first. And so when Juan was talking about all these groups that exist, these organizations that help connect other people, Outerly being one of many, 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 if the outdoors feels daunting, if it's a struggle to go outside, maybe refocusing or reframing going outdoors or finding a connection with nature to finding a connection with people, finding a connection with others who enjoy those things, it can feel a lot more accessible and a lot more easy because everybody knows another person. Everybody has formulated some kind of relationship with another person. And so if you can formulate a relationship or relationships with people who can enable you to get outdoors and encourage you and hold you accountable if that's something that you have as a goal, it can be a much easier way to approach the outdoors. One last thing that I will say to wrap this one up, the first time that I was admitted to the hospital for major depression, when I was recovering, I couldn't get out of bed. I was immobile. I couldn't do anything, barely could even brush my teeth or shower. And I looked out my window one day and I said, gosh, it would be so nice to just walk across the street. And so I picked up my hammock from the closet. It was dusty on the shelf, walked across the street in the middle of a tiny little park that was just 1 block big in downtown Chicago. And I set up my hammock between 2 trees and I laid there exactly like I would have in my bed alone. But I got to look up and see the sun shining through the trees, and I got to hear the birds around me and the cars around me, and I got to see other people and dogs running through the park and experiencing joy. And even if at the time I couldn't experience that joy, I knew it was there. I was surrounded by it. It was around me in the connections with my city and the nature and the other people around me. And so I leave you with that to say, hanging a hammock in the middle of the park across your street is just as outdoorsy as any other activity that you see on National Geographic, on an advertisement. And I encourage you to take that one step or those couple of steps to cross the street and to do the things that surround you with joy.
I love that. But I also wanted to add, I think in terms of accessibility, especially we've been talking, I think more people have accessibility in the front of their mind right now because of COVID. There's a lot of things that just aren't accessible when it comes to nature, right? Even at local parks. And so I think small things that we can do is just invite nature into our backyards, right? I was kind of skimming the comments or the chat, and I saw someone saying that they have clay soil, and I'm not sure where you are, but I have clay soil too, and I realized like native plants thrive in clay soil here, right, in California. So when I started picking up on those details and like what can grow, what shouldn't grow, I was able to cultivate like a habitat for different butterflies, for different hoverflies. Like I'd never thought that flies could be cute, but they are. And so like there's this saying of like, and that's pretty accessible to me, right? Like, and that could be different for someone else, but like inviting nature into your backyard. There's a quote that my elders have always said, and it's cada cabeza un mundo. So like in each head, there's a world. In each mind, there's a world, depending on how you want to translate it. And I feel like exposing myself to that process of like actually getting into the dirt and like implementing a whole other type of plant, a whole other type of ecosystem where there's like a symbiosis, like it opened up so much more in my mind of like what it was able to happen in my own backyard and what was able to thrive in my own backyard. And so really like acknowledging that and realizing that I could even grow a bunch of those in containers. I was taking this course with California Native Plants. He's a cultural practitioner, and he has shown like how many plants really like containers because in nature they grow in smaller areas, right? So like this kind of counteracts what a lot of people know about gardening, what a lot of people know about growing their own food, about kind of decorating their yard. We can grow our own food, we can grow a habitat, and we can enjoy it right a couple steps inside our backyard. And so I feel like and it's been talked about, like, you don't have to go into the mountains, you don't have to go across the ocean to an island that you're unfamiliar with to enjoy nature. And so really acknowledging that and knowing that like you can ease into nature by inviting it into your backyard, because that way you don't have to worry about COVID if you're immunocompromised, or if you're not, because no one really wants to go through that. You don't have to worry about if you're going to be safe because you're a woman or because you're a smaller stature, you know? So really being intentional and like learning about what is, and again, if you have the time, learning about what is possible in your own community. Something cute too that I realized is like growing up, rather than like just go straight to the store to buy food, we would ask our neighbors, like depending on what season it was, if they had lemons, we would trade different fruits and such. And so that's kind of a connection that we practice with nature, but also with each other. So, and obviously in that like transpiring of trade, we were also having conversations and updating each other on our lives. And so like really acknowledging like what infrastructure technically is already in place in our communities, and not feeling like we're completely out of touch, because a lot of us are doing a lot more than we think that we are. And to cultivate that is going to empower us even further. So maybe take a step further and go and restore a part of a local river that is not looking so great because of invasives or trash, you know? So it's kind of like you build a foundation of familiarity and build off of that. It's not go straight to climbing Mount Everest, you know, like it's never going to be that. And so knowing, like in harm reduction, there's this quote of meeting people where they're at. And oftentimes we fail to meet ourselves where we're at, right? And in this context, just like assessing what we already have, assessing the familiarity that we carry, and continuing to cultivate it, I think is a way to move forward primarily.
Thank you, Vanessa, and thank you, everyone. I think that you're doing a great job of just expanding the idea of what being in nature is and can look like. And I think that's so important, because so often, like Kay and many of you mentioned, you know, we think of nature and it can be intimidating if it's something that you're not regularly doing, or you might think that it has to be this big activity. But I love that you all explained so clearly that the things that we can bring into our daily lives, our daily practices, that really can help connect us in those ways. And I know for a lot of people in the comments sharing, they're feeling the same and similar in my experience as well. I know our time is flying by here together, and our conversation has just gone by so quickly. But to wrap us up, I'd love just to hear from each of you panelists quickly. As I know there have been so many great ideas put in the chat and things that people have said, oh, that's a great idea, I'm going to try that. Of different ways that people can start being in nature outside of their communities, things they're doing. So I'd love for you just to share something that you are passionate about, whether that be gardening, going on walks, hiking, observing animals in nature, anything that really you have found to be healing for yourself, just as a moment of encouragement to our participants. I know for myself, I live in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and so it is cold for much of the year, and that can be so challenging. And as someone who has dealt with anxiety and depression, those cold winter months can be really, really hard. And this year, I just challenged myself to bundle up and walk places, even if it was, walking to the store to grab lunch, or different, if I'm walking to where I'm going to work out instead of driving, even if it's cold out, and just feeling the sunshine in those cold months was so healing and helpful for me, to be outside, even though it was cold, feel the fresh air, breathe the fresh air, and feel that connection. So I know there can be a lot of things that can keep us from connecting, but I love your little reminders, and I just love to wrap up with any other suggestions you have for anyone, or just, personal favorites of how you like to connect.
I'll go real quick. One of the things that makes me passionate about this work is thinking about the next generation of leadership. I have my son here today, which is the reason why I've been going back and forth. We started asking young people, what defines well-being for you? Like, what does that mean? For many of them, it looks very different. So I would encourage everyone to take a look at that link that I shared the report on. We're finding some interesting responses to that. But it is thinking about the next generation and encouraging the next generation to connect in their special ways.
One of the things that we talk about a lot on the Outerly team is an idea called the outdoor happy hour. And it's basically replacing social activities that you would do with your friends, like going to a bar, going out to dinner, et cetera, with an outdoor activity. And so now that the sun is out later and we can, once we're all done with work, we can all go out to a park and go for a walk instead of maybe getting a drink, or doing both if that's what you would like to do. It's a lot easier to motivate yourself to do it when it's a social activity that other people are involved in. And so I would encourage all of you who socialize to replace or supplement some of your social activities with outdoor activities. And it's a really easy and fun way to get outside with other people.
And this is Thelma. I really like that, and I believe that's what I practice, is just to connect with someone. Like, hey, let's go for a walk, and it can be just. I've done a lot of that too, and I used to do a lot of running. So, and again, I would just say, look around. I mean, just be thankful for the environment, the sky. I mean, even if the sun is not out, in our Crow way of belief, every day is a good day. The only time you have a bad day is when you lose a loved one. So we cannot look at the weather, the environment around us and can complain. It's having that appreciation and thankfulness that every day is a good day. It's a day that the Creator God has blessed us with, and we're going to go out and enjoy it with someone and take a walk. So thank you.
Do you mind repeating the question so I answer properly?
You are great. Just one idea of a way that you've been connecting with nature lately that you would like to pass on as a recommendation.
I think just to go back to really familiarizing myself. I know I'm not, my heritage is from elsewhere, but rather than kind of try to morph nature around me to be what I want it to be or what I'm familiar with, really embracing what already lived here, what feeds the ecosystems here, and what actually does local climate regulation. And in doing so, you open yourself up to so many new things. Like I said, plant relatives, all types of relatives that are beautiful and really brighten up your day. And you're also learning more about like your community and being a change that is very much needed in really using your privileges, right? I think we need to use our privilege and our insights for better to set up a better foundation for our future. And that also feeds into like better mental health for myself because it assures me that there's a future that I'm looking forward to. And I think that's what a lot of people need right now.
I love that. Thank you, Vanessa. I such a hope. I love all of the great ideas and practical ways that people can take some notes from this time together and apply it to their lives, their week, their month, their year. So in honor of Mental Health Month, I would love for everyone listening just to take that as a challenge for, you know, the rest of May and throughout this year to just try and find those moments where you can connect and whatever that looks like and means for you. There were so many great ideas shared today. I appreciate all of you for your wisdom, your insight, and just for being here and sharing so open and honestly with us. Thank you, everyone who has been joining us today, for your thoughtful comments in the chat. I loved seeing them and reading them. I'm so appreciative for those of you that were able to join us. Just a reminder that this was being recorded. We'll send out an email with the recording and some of the resources that our speakers discussed today within 1 week. So keep an eye out for that. And we will have additional resources and things coming out throughout the end of this month and starting for Pride Month in June as well. So thank you all so much for joining us, being here, and a special thank you to Alma, Kay, Vanessa, and Juan. Thank you all. Have a great rest of your afternoon.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a nice day.